Hey everybody, so welcome to our Designing Your Webinar. So this is part 2 of our Maryland Wing How-To Webinar series. I'm glad you're all here, and we are recording this so that if anybody down the road wants to review it or see it again or share it with a friend, we can do that. So thank you for coming. So today, just like our part 1, we have myself, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Brenda Reed, and we have Chief Master Sergeant Tom Reed. We've changed roles this week. Instead of Tom being the main presenter and me being the behind the scenes, we've swapped it out. I'm going to be the main presenter, and Tom is going to take your questions. So if you have a question, just type it in on your questions you have a dashboard, there's a questions section. If you type it in, he will be the one to answer you. So just let's kind of do a real quick review of your dashboard. So what you're going to see is you have, it should be orange, an orange microphone. That means when it's orange, you are on mute. Right now, everybody but myself is muted. At certain points, we will unmute you, and you can ask a question. Okay. Tom, stop muting me. Then you, let's see. This thing came back. Okay, so then the next one down underneath the mute is you have where you can put it in full screen if you want. You can leave it up small. You can put it in full screen. The next one here is you can, right here, you can raise your hand. So if you have a question or a problem and you can't put it in questions, raise your hand, and I believe Tom will be looking at that as well. And then you can ask a question like I've said. So on your question area right here, you can ask a question. Tom will respond. Depending on what your question is, when you ask the question, nobody is going to see your question. If it's a question that is more appropriate to be answered privately, Tom has that choice. If he thinks that it's something that the entire group will benefit from, he can respond so that everybody sees it. When he responds with everybody seeing it, then everybody will also see your question. So just be aware that whatever you type could be seen by everybody. So. Okay, now I need to get out of here. Let's see, I'm going to erase, and I should be, okay, okay, there we are. So what we're going to do first is, we're going to take a poll. So we did one of these last week, and we're going to take a poll, and basically last week we talked a little bit about webinars. So I'm hoping that over the course of this week you have been thinking about, how will I use this? What will I do with my first webinar? So I want to know how are your plans coming along for your first webinar? So it should be seeing the poll now. So go ahead and answer what you think it would be. You should be seeing it. You're okay. So let's see. All right, we have 4 people attending, and it looks like everybody voted. So I'm going to close the poll, and I should be able to share the poll. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Okay. So as you can see, one of you said you've got a topic in mind, but nothing else. 2 of you have said you're still working on a topic, and 25% of you are a little surprised to find that we're expecting you to actually do a topic. You did know there's a final exam in this, correct? So, okay, good. Now we've done the poll, so let's move forward. So we're going to start with a little bit of a review from last week, just so that you can remember. And I'm mixing my little cheat sheets up here. So let's just talk real quickly, a review. So what are the benefits of a webinar? Well, first of all, they save time. You don't have to drive somewhere. You can do it at home. So for your attendees and for yourself, you don't have to dress up, you don't have to go outside, you don't have to fight the traffic. They save time. They're interactive. I'm talking to you, you are able to respond, whether it's a poll or a question. You're able to go back and forth. It's not just a straight PowerPoint presentation. So it's not like somebody just watching a video or just listening to an audio of something. There is that interactivity. We have a worldwide reach. I can do this webinar and I can do this for anybody who wants to, anywhere in the world that wants to register. We can reach anybody in the world. Because you say, well, we're Maryland Wing. Why is that important? We're just right here on the East Coast. However, we have Maryland Wing members all over the world. We have one that's right now stationed in Dubai. For several years, Tom and I were Maryland Wing members, but we were stationed in Germany. We have some over in the Pacific area, that are military, and they may want to chime in. So we have a worldwide reach. We can go anywhere and meet our members where they are. Okay, a little bit slightly different. We have a worldwide audience. We're not limited to Maryland Wing members. We can reach an audience from around the world. So slightly different than the reach. Reaching, I see it as we're reaching our people. Worldwide audiences, we can attract people from everywhere to us. It's engaging. We have the tools, and we're going to go over these tools. So we've used the question and we've used the polls. We're going to talk a little bit more about these later. So it's an engaging tool platform. You can have special guests in the form of presenters. And it's a training tool. Yes, we're using it right now in a live webinar, but we are also recording it. So we can use this over and over again. So it's a training tool. Now, there are some drawbacks to a webinar. There's lots of positives, and there's a few drawbacks like anything. First of all, as an instructor or a presenter, you have a learning curve. It's not a huge learning curve if you're comfortable talking with people. You just, for me, I have to look at this little dot on my computer. I don't have any problem talking in large audiences. But if you are afraid of large audiences, you could do this and you're not aware of how many people are looking back at you. So might make things a little bit less awkward, but you have this learning curve. You have a tool. You need to learn how to use the tool, and it takes a little bit of practice. As we mentioned last week, Tom and I are both learning this GoToWebinar tool itself. So we're not as polished as maybe we should be, but we're learning, and that's part of our learning curve. So next, you have a participant learning curve. You as participants need to learn, just like Buddy was asking about the handouts. Can he download the handouts? Well, that's something that the participants need to learn. They need to learn how to ask a question. They need to learn how to do a poll or, anything like that. And finally, building a good webinar takes a little bit of time. You can't just plop up a PowerPoint. Dull webinars kill. And that's what we're mainly going to be talking about in this presentation is what are some of the best practices to designing a good webinar? We don't want, like this picture, we don't want our audience to fall asleep, or if they're wide awake, we really don't want them sitting there, playing solitaire or answering emails. We want them to be involved in our webinar. So when we're designing a webinar, what are we looking for? We're looking to make a connection. We want each person that is part of your audience, you want to connect with them in some way. people learn in many different learning styles. Some need visual, some need audio, some need to actually be doing things. Some people can grasp it right away, other people need time to absorb. And so we want to connect with our audience and we want to get them engaged. And not only get them engaged, but keep them engaged. You don't want to have a really great beginning and then next thing you know, they're bored and they're off doing emails. Or, and I'm guilty of this because I've been in some really bad webinars that I just leave. And you know what? I'm going to get the recording, but it was so boring I didn't even bother to listen to it. So you don't want that to happen. You're going to put a lot of work into your webinars. You want to keep your people engaged. And so to do that, you want to make it interesting and you want to make it fun. What you don't want to do is when making your presentation, you don't want monochrome colors, okay? You don't, that would just, is boring. You don't want black on white, white on black, just boring monochrome colors. You want to add graphics. To have no graphics or no pictures is just not engaging at all either. Now imagine a PowerPoint that is nothing but sentences and paragraphs. Just bullet after bullet of paragraphs. And imagine those paragraphs are in tiny font. That's not good. That's boring. You're going to lose people. They might start to cry like this little boy. You don't want a monotone voice. Vary it. Speed up, slow down, raise your voice a little bit, talk a little bit softer, just like you would do in a classroom setting. You want to vary your voice. And imagine those paragraphs and you're reading those paragraphs to your audience. Yeah, they're going to be on their emails really quickly. So what you don't want is to lose them, get them on email, get them playing solitaire or worse. You just don't want them to log off and not even think twice about your webinar and what you have to present. So these are some of the things you don't want. So as you're planning your slides for your webinar, there's some things that you want to do. And here's just a little Tom likes cartoons, comics. So, this just kind of made a little bit of sense, and this is what we want to avoid. But I'm sure that some of you have been in a meeting where you've had this happen. Okay, so a couple best practices when you're planning your slides. And webinars don't have to be slides. It's good, you need the visual, but sometimes you might want a webinar where if you say you're teaching e-services to some people, maybe it's a group of parents that need to learn how to work with their cadets to do an online Form 31 to sign up for a national activity. A lot of times parents don't understand e-services. Well, you can actually show your screen, and as you're talking, you can be clicking through the actual screen. So it doesn't have to be PowerPoint. However, if you're not doing something that's actual screenshots, then you want to have a PowerPoint there because you want something visual to engage them. So the first thing you want to do is have just one idea per slide. Now, I could have fit all of my ideas for how to do a PowerPoint on one slide, but then I would be just having the same slide in front of you, and that gets boring. When I was talking about what you don't want to do, I could have just had one picture of a yawning person. But instead, as I talked, I just had multiple pictures of yawning people. And the idea was that it was always changing. It kept you looking at the screen. And that's what you want to do. You want to keep them engaged. Because ideally, you want to change something about every 20 to 30 seconds. Now, that seems like a lot, and it is. But when you're in a classroom setting and you're doing a PowerPoint, they're watching you. So there is something always moving. Now I think you can see me right now, and that's another tool you can use, but maybe you don't want to be there and have people looking at you. And that's an option you have. But you want to change up every 20-30 seconds. If you don't have a slide, just change up your pictures, kind of like I did. And there's lots of slides out there on Google Images that you can get. They're open source. You could pull your own pictures, whatever you want to do. Take screenshots, or however you want, but just change it up. Every 20 to 30 seconds is good. And you want to use a lot of fun fonts and graphics. Okay, it doesn't have to be all photos. It could be charts. It could be just words that are in some fun fonts, just to make it interesting. Make people do that double take to look and see what you're talking about. So here's another it's a Dilbert. So I'm sure you have all been in meetings where this has happened, and I know that I have thought this many times. It's like, if you're just going to read it to me, please just email it to me. I'll read it for myself. So what we're going to do on this webinar is now I want to talk about some of the tools that GoToWebinar has. So you make up these slides, and I don't want to tell you too much on how to make your slides, other than those best practices. I think we all know how to make slides. You don't need a class on how to make a PowerPoint, but what you needed was just a little bit of guidance on how to make your PowerPoints better so that you can use them in a webinar format. But there's other things that you can use in addition to your PowerPoint. There's tools in GoToWebinar. Then you can increase this engagement, this interaction with your audience by using polls like we did. You can use surveys. There are 2 types of surveys you could use. There's one that you could do before the actual webinar, and then there's one that you could use after the webinar. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Handouts. You raising your hand like I showed you early on when we were discussing your dashboard, and asking questions. Those are some of the tools that we're going to talk about right now. So questions. You can ask, it's sort of a pre-webinar survey or questions, and you have the ability when you're setting up your webinar to create this any way you want. You can ask all kinds of questions. Now, we did this with this webinar, but the only question I asked you was, what's your CAP ID? That's the only thing I asked you, and that was just more for my benefit to kind of see how this tool worked, because I set these up several weeks ago. But what if you're teaching a class that's related to something emergency services, and you want to know, what are your current qualifications, just so you can get to know your audience, and you can change and adjust your presentation to match your audience. You could say, what are your current qualifications? You could ask them, have you completed specific prerequisites? You could say, what do you hope to learn in this webinar? You may not have anything that you want to ask them, and that's certainly okay. But you have these pre-webinar questions that you can use. Then there's the question function, which let me look real quick and see. Okay, so not too many questions have been asked right now, but that's certainly okay. It's kind of good that you don't have any questions. But what I want to do right now is I'm going to open it up to questions. And what I'd like Tom to help me with is, if you have a question, like, okay, Mike doesn't have a mic. Mike doesn't have a mic. Okay. But if you want Tom to unmute you, then type it in, and then you can just ask your question and everybody can hear. So does anybody have a question at this point? We'll just open this up.
Or if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand, and we will unmute you. Okay, Buddy goes first. His hand was up first.
All right. Can you hear me?
Hi, Buddy. I can hear you.
So do I pose my question like this verbally, or do I type it in?
You are unmuted. Everybody can hear you. So yes, you can do. We're a small enough group that we can do it this way. If it's a large group, you would want to probably type it in.
Okay. Well, I'll just speak. The questions that you could ask, as you asked for the CAPID, those are what fed back to you. Then what you do with them is up to you as you get into the webinar?
Correct. Correct. Okay. So if you were, say our safety officer was doing a monthly safety class, for those who couldn't be, who couldn't attend at their squadron, then having the CAPID just makes his job easier when he's going to go and record it into eServices that person has taken their safety training for the month. So I put it in there just, it's just a way to keep track of our members.
So when you ask these questions and the people answer them, then I presume you go online with GoToWebinar and you'll see all the questions that are presented. Will the other students see the answers, the answers to your questions?
They will not.
Okay.
There is a spot where you can download a variety of reports, and some of those reports are the pre-questions, some of them are the post-questions. I can download a report at the end of this that will show me exactly how many minutes each of you were on this webinar and the responses to any questions that you might have had.
Right,
so there's all kinds of reports you can do. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
And Brenda, if I can add in, you can also do the pre-survey and to gather information, and then you can build it into your webinar. Based on my pre-survey, this is what people are talking about.
Surely. Well, you can, from that, you can gauge people's level of experience with a particular topic that you're presenting.
Correct.
They may be well versed in it, and you can quickly pass into more meaty topics. Whereas if they seem to have, not the slightest idea about even the glossary of the topic, you can know where to start off by giving them, some common words and concepts.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, buddy. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, the chaplain does.
Oh, Chaplain's here. Hi, Chaplain.
Okay, and you unmute him.
That's good.
There we go.
Okay.
I'm looking, of course, as the receiver's screen here. Is the presenter's desktop capable of splitting so you can see what's coming down the pike, or you memorize what your presentation looked like? Or
what I do is, yes, well, first of all, it does not split. So what I do is I know my presentation, but I have, if you could see me, I have all of these little Post-it notes just stuck up here on my computer. So that I can remember what I want to say. However, what some people do is they actually have a second, they have dual monitors up, and one has the presentation on it that they're up, that they can see, and then others, then they're actually working off of the one screen. The professionals have a whole setups. I'm doing it pretty low key, but so far it's working.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
And next week we're going to put you in those presenter modes, so you're going to be able to see and manipulate the presenter screen.
Unfortunately, next week I'm going to be in Long Island representing Maryland State as the Maryland Chief Chaplain for the state, so I won't be able to be here.
Right, but we can do a one-on-one. As I was telling somebody before this got started, there is a practice mode that we can get into, and we can create a webinar and just go on and practice. We can just do that. So if you want to do that, we can certainly do that.
I'll follow up and coordinate when I get back with you, if that's okay.
Perfect.
And actually, he can do it from New York. Just take his computer with.
That's true. You could. You could.
But yes, that's true. Unfortunately, I'm going to be representing the state at a banquet on that night.
Oh, you don't want to take us all with you, huh?
Well, I could turn the camera around and you can see everybody. I'm not joking.
There we go. Okay.
Could be the
Any other?
presenter and
Yeah,
present
there
what
we
you're doing.
Yep. Are there any other questions before I move ahead with the presentation? Just kind of wanted to use the question function just a little bit to kind of give you some ideas throughout this of the various tools that we can use. Oh, you can see my cats. That's probably one of those no-nos for webinars, is don't have your cats fighting in the background. But anyway, all right, no more
No,
questions?
it keeps it engaging.
It's engaging, yes.
Engaging.
Yes. So wait, hold on, let me move one away. Should probably lock them up before this. Okay, so click back on that. Okay, now handouts. Buddy had asked about the handouts. You'll see on your dashboard, there's a place that says handouts. And I have uploaded 5 handouts. 5 is the maximum that you can upload. And you should be able to download these just straight off of, so everybody go ahead and try and do one. I've got mostly PDFs, but I did put one Word document on there. So the PDFs are all handouts about webinars that I actually got from GoToWebinar. And I think these would be helpful for you to review as you're planning different webinars. And then the webinar links, the Word document, that is just a bunch of web links that I have come up with, or that I have found that have been helpful to me and that I've enjoyed reading. They come from a variety of sources, and so some of them are about designing webinars and designing, PowerPoints, and just some different things that you can kind of look at. So you have the option of doing handouts. So there's all kinds of times when this would come in handy. It also extends your webinar. When you're done, like most of you, I don't expect you to read these handouts right now, but they could download them and read them later. You could have a handout that is something that you want them to work on during the webinar. Maybe you're going to be working on something together and they need to be filling something out. They then have them download that at the very beginning, and that's all there. So let me go back to the attendees. So the next one is raise your hand. And we covered this a little bit in the beginning. So what I'd like you to do is I would like you to raise your hand if you are able to download one of the handouts. Okay, Mike and Buddy, they downloaded. Okay, so I don't see the other two. So hopefully that, if you had trouble downloading, then type that in as a question. And yeah, and Buddy, you can just click on your raise hand and it'll go away from my screen now.
Right. Yeah, it looks like the chaplain had trouble. He's trying to find where the handout download button is. I
think you just click on the actual handout. Because when I go on that, it creates a hand like it's a link. You can click on it. So just try clicking on the actual word on the handout and see if you have any trouble with that, if that works, chaplain. So, okay, so we've covered raising our hand as one of the tools. So we're going to do another poll. Okay, this will be our second poll. It'll be our final poll for the night. But we took a poll early on, but now I want it here as a poll that we're talking about this actual tool. And you can think about how, what kind of polls can you do? They can be very serious. They can be just fun. So this one is, I want to know, what's your favorite tool to engage the audience? So I'm going to launch it, and your options are the questions panel, polls, handouts, raising your hand, or lots of slides and graphics. Not really a tool, but it is a way to engage your audience. So, okay, it looks like everybody has voted. I'm going to close the poll and I'm going to share. So you should be able to see that now. And looks like polls are the favorite. The questions panel and lots of slides and graphics. No one really liked the handouts or raising your hand. So, but there's a time and a place for each of those. So, but yeah, the polls are kind of fun. And I think you have the option, you could do lots of polls. I want to say that there was like up to 20 polls that you could do. So that is definitely an option that you have. All right, so now I hide that. And what you want to do basically with all of these tools is you want to remember that some form of engagement will drive the learning deeper. And that's what we want to do. We want to get them involved. We want them to learn at a deeper level. We don't want it just to be just something that they're going to forget, because this is, the cone of learning. And basically people say, if you look at the cone up at the top, it's reading and then hearing words, seeing. But then you have like the reverse cone on the other side. So after 2 weeks, we tend to remember only 10% of what we've read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, and so on, down to 90% of what we say and do. So the more interaction you get with your audience, the more they're going to remember. And really, you go through all of this to create the webinar. You want them to remember what you have to say, because you felt it important enough to present it. So you want them to remember. Second, I wanted to just do something real quick. So yeah, if you read the slides, 10% is all they're going to remember. But then they're going to hear it, they're going to see it. But then if you actually do things, pictures, I'm very visual. I remember a picture much more than I will remember hearing something. I'll even remember words much more than if I just hear something, because if I hear it, I don't remember it. I have to actually see something. So everybody's different. You have to remember that, going back at the beginning, where you have all kinds of different learning styles, and you need to remember all of those as you're creating and designing your webinar, because you want them to remember. After 2 weeks, you really would like them to remember. 90% would be great, 100%, but for some topics I'd settle for 50%, or just not that they didn't fall asleep during my webinar or get out of it altogether. So I'm just going to review real quick. I don't see on my screen, I don't have my clock right there visible, but hopefully we're doing good on our time. So let's just review. You want to make a connection. You want to keep your audience engaged. You want to make it fun. You want to make it interesting. Only one idea per slide. Now, I know here I've got 4 ideas on there, but this is a review. When we were going through this, each one of these was on a different slide. You want to change the visual about every 20 to 30 seconds. Use some fun fonts, use graphics, photos, charts, graphs, whatever is going to get them looking at your screen. Use all of these tools to engage your audience and then take their learning to a deeper level. So we've kind of talked about designing a webinar. So what's next? Well, as I mentioned when Chaplain Bauer we were talking his question, next week we're going to do hands-on. We're going to come on here. We're going to show you a little bit about how to set up a webinar. We'll go into the kinds of things you need to have prepared when we actually schedule a webinar, those pre-questions and things like that. And then we're gonna reverse roles. We're going to make each of you a presenter. And you don't have to present a webinar. I will warn you that make sure whatever you have on your desktop, because everybody will see your screen. So you might want to have, like I had those cute little boys on there. But then you're going to actually be able to see the presenter screen and the dashboard, because my dashboard there's a lot more on my dashboard than on your dashboard. And I want you to be able to see that. So we'll have this tomorrow. I will send out email invites to everybody. And it'll be Tuesday again at 8 o'clock. So hopefully this time is working for you. But any final thoughts? Any final questions? And we can just unmute you and Okay. So.
Okay, Buddy, go ahead.
Okay. Brenda, I have a question, please.
Sure.
It appears as a participant, I sense there's a little bit of software downloaded from GoToWebinar that's taken off when the session is over. Whether that's true or not, my question is, if we become a presenter, do we have to download software to do that?
No, you do not. When I got the license, I had to download something, but then I have it right on my desktop that I can just click on GoToWebinar at any time and just get my webinars. Tom, though, he is a co-organizer, so there's different levels. I'm an organizer. I can appoint a co-organizer that once I start it, Tom can do whatever if I turn it over to him. And he can also be a presenter, but he does not have anything downloaded on his computer.
So that when we have our turn to be a presenter, we won't have to download anything.
No, it's all done off of my dashboard.
Yeah, follow up on that question. Here, you and Tom are working as a team. You're the presenter. He's the co-presenter or co-organizer. Is it a practical matter for anyone doing a webinar to have two people, a team, or can it be done by one person? Recognizing that if you have just one person, it'd be difficult to present it to the class at the same time, answer questions that are typed to you.
Exactly. It's best, and there's a couple reasons. It's best to have two people. One, like you mentioned, it's really hard to answer those questions while you're presenting because there's just too much going on the screen. But another reason, and I hadn't thought about this until I was watching some of the GoToWebinar videos. Another good reason is what happens. You saw my cats fighting in the background. So, well, technically, it's probably unprofessional to have them in the room, but what happens if my computer, they walked by and they turned off my computer? Or they, well, this wouldn't work for Tom and I, but whatever, my computer died. I was going to say a power outage, but that would have wiped out both Tom and I. It's best to have a backup person because if something happened, maybe I accidentally hit a button and turn it off. Then Tom or whoever is your co-organizer can kind of carry on until you get back online. It's not leaving your participants hanging, wondering what's going on.
Gotcha.
Okay, any other questions? If so, raise your hand. Okay, Buddy, you're back up.
Nope. You told me to raise my hand. I did, but I didn't have a question.
Okay. Okay.
All right, then tap your hand again, Buddy, to take yourself off. So right now your hand's up. All right, there we go. So no other questions, no final thoughts? Okay.
Mike, you don't have anything if you want to chat? Otherwise, we're good.
Otherwise, okay, great. Thanks, Chaplain Bauer. Thanks, Buddy, Kai, Mike. I really appreciate you all showing up tonight. This is being recorded, so tomorrow I should have a recording, and I will make sure that you each have the ability to view that. And we're going to make use of some of that cloud space that Mike's created for us, and then we'll be able to post the links actually onto probably our website so that you can watch them at any time or share them with others. So if there's no more questions, I want to thank each of you for coming out tonight. I really do appreciate it. And yes.
I have another question, please.
Okay.
Would it be possible, since this is all done through the internet and you don't have to be in one specific place to do it, that if you have two people doing it, the presenter and the co-presenter could be at different locations?
They could be in different cities.
Well, that's important because down here on the Eastern Shore, you have to travel 20 miles to find somebody else in the CAP. And so it would just take more coordination up front between the two people, but it would be possible to do so that I could work with somebody on the Western Shore and have the team working to make a webinar. Okay,
exactly.
Good. Thank you.
Sure, that's exactly right.
You.
So, okay, well then I'm going to leave it at that. You all have a good rest of the evening, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you.